The main challenge was how to not get stuck in that and how to look at the problems from different. But in this new environment, I was not interesting to anyone because I was not expert in the product. I just
about the technology. It's not only about the framework and architecture in itself. It's about the human side of the architecture.
I think it's indeed. It's from one side, it's positive side of architecture work that it's not like boring or it's unpredictable. So it's exciting and it's interesting, but then also it means that you always need to go out of your comfort zone.
Today we have Elena as our guest, and Elena is an architect, domain architect at ING for already 1 year. Previously she also worked in architecture roles in different companies, and she has over 20 years of experience working for different companies in different roles. What we have in common is that our career looks very similar because we both live in Netherlands and we also worked in a field for over 20 years. And what we want to talk specifically about is the experience or knowledge or expertise you have or you need to have as an architect when you start in a new company. So we want to cover certain topics to discuss what challenges you face as an architect when you start in a new company, because every time you start a new company, you need to face different challenges. You need to face a company that is different in size, big or small ones. You need to face different cultures, even multicultural environment or maybe more monocultural environment. You need to face a different working culture, different business processes that are involved, different organization structure and roles that exist in the company itself. So those challenges is something that we want to discuss today in this talk, and I welcome Lena. So thanks for coming.
Yes.
And maybe we can start by asking you to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone. Maybe so you already introduced me a bit, so I can start with my first project maybe as an architect. So how did I start in the Netherlands? It was a long time ago, and I started at university, so at Eindhoven University, and there.
Just were studies, right?
Yeah, it was kind of combination of already study and work, because I was employed by the university, but then we also got some lectures from different
experts
from industry, and it was with focus on architecture. So actually idea was that after finishing these studies I could start in the company also like as an architect, although now I see that to be successful architect in the company, you need really to have quite some life experience and also work experience, because it requires quite some knowledge about communication with people, so about different businesses, about different technologies. Yeah.
But still, coming back to your experience at university, so we may say that at that time, about 20 years ago, you were already thinking of becoming an architect and had an ambition to work in this field.
Yeah, I think it's just like in general when you finish your studies in computer science and you start to work as an engineer, then you think maybe at some point I would like to become architect. So I think often people have this in their mind. So I had this idea, but I didn't know exactly if I will do it or not. So but I think it sounded quite interesting that it's a combination of engineering work and business work and communication.
So basically, we may say that you had education in technology, and you had an ambition to work in architecture role, but you were still completely rookie in this area.
Yeah, indeed. So after finishing this program, I started as an engineer so I worked as an engineer in different companies because I was interested in programming. So first I started with object-oriented languages. Java was popular at that time. So that's why I was just really gaining experience as a programmer engineer. And I also wanted to learn about different industries. So I worked for printer companies. I started to develop user interfaces for printers.
Was it your first project?
I think it was my first project after finishing studies.
What was it about?
Actually it was, so I also did a bit of embedded programming for printers, but mostly it was about user interfaces. So it's for professional printers, it's for printer itself or web interfaces also.
But before we move to your next career progression step, could you share maybe a little bit about your experience at OCE? Because this was basically your first project. You started for the first time for a company, rather a big company, I would assume. A new project, new technology, new people, new environment. What were exactly the challenges, your challenges at that time, especially looking at the fact that during your education you already have learned certain basic things about the work of an architect, about how to approach the problem resolution, and so on?
It's indeed. It was my first really project in the company. So I think it was a lot about learning about communication. So learning about different roles in the company, who is responsible for what, but also about the different processes. So because one thing is just to learn programming, and another one when you need to release something to production, how testing works. So how the whole planning works. Like I don't remember what did we use at that time. Was it already agile or maybe?
But this is an important thing you are talking about, because it highlights the fact that an architect needs to understand, or even like engineer in a company needs to understand not only the technology he needs to deal, or she or you had to deal with, but also the processes within the organization. And it's not only about the design and engineering, but also about the delivery, about the values that needs to be delivered within even like a certain period of time, because we are not it's not an academic institution, it's really like a company that is producing some value on the market. So I think those things are important to note, because also when you progress through the career, you had probably to face them as well, just in a different context.
True. I think that engineering works, it actually requires more of working with these processes, working with other people. So it takes more time than just development.
So okay, let's stop talking about your experience at OCE and move forward. As long as I remember, your next career step was a project at the DOCdata payments.
True. After that, it was quite small company, so we had one engineering team. It was really like very cozy environment. You get to know people really well. So I think in that sense it was quite quite nice experience. Also, you don't work in a big office with all these, let's say, strict rules or which is very official. So I think that was nice. But then, because this product is it's quite small. So after some time, it becomes just boring. And then as engineer, you move further. So you find something else, another company to work on. That's why there, I stayed for a while. And then after that, I moved to KLM. So to the flight industry. Which was again like quite different. So there I worked on different products, on the booking tool for the flight.
And it was already a bigger company, right?
Yeah, so it was a bigger company. Yeah, already with actually there I already met architects, different like domain architects, enterprise architects.
But did you already face different challenges as an engineer working in a bigger company with a different culture? What was your experience there? And challenges maybe?
It required much more alignment. So of course, it became much slower. The whole
delivery,
delivery of the of the functionality. I remember that we had also this already really like Scrum processes. So it was a lot of bureaucratic planning and. So I think it was much more organized and official than, of course, in the previous.
So what exactly were challenges you were facing in this new environment? Because it's different from your previous experience. You mentioned that the DOCdata Payments was a smaller company where you worked in a more tightly coupled environment where decisions probably were taken faster. And I assume that at KLM this was completely different because you worked in a bigger company, many teams, many managers. There were probably more hierarchical structure, more roles, managers, architects, decision taking was taking longer. And you also mentioned you worked at the following the agile environment. I assume you also worked with more of a multicultural environment. So share a little bit of your experience there. Did you like it, or what were exactly challenges you were facing there as an engineer?
Yeah, I think it was quite different because there were lots of different teams working together. So indeed, like to compare to the previous company. And then you, at that moment, I think it was just beginning of this continuous delivery processes. So I remember we had lots of discussions how to set up continuous delivery, because still like releasing once per month or once per few weeks. I don't remember. It was it was not like daily releases how it happens now.
But continuous delivery at that time was rather a new concept, right?
It was a rather new concept indeed. So I remember, it was really quite some interesting discussions that we had, and it was really something new and something exciting to learn.
But this was also the mindset, right? Because things were changing, the way people were delivering the product or value. And the mindset of the people had also changed, right? Did you notice any challenges in that regard? In your colleagues, in yourself, maybe?
I think it was because everyone knew that, for example, like if you work with several teams, if you don't deliver it daily or weekly, then after that you need to collaborate all together to merge all your work. And that was, I remember, it cost lots of time. We had lots of problems with that. So it's, but indeed, like changing your mindset to accept some risk or to change in the big organization, like to change ways of working, that was quite difficult. So, so from technological point of view, I think that was the most interesting part. And besides that, of course, like then working with all these different functions, like architects, also different managers, also yeah, it was time of the Scrum. Okay, now Scrum also exists, but there it was just when it was really used according to the book. So we had all these sprint planning meetings for 2 days or something, and yeah, also all these roles like Scrum Master and so on. So that was also, I could also experience from one side that it was useful, but also sometimes it becomes just bureaucracy if you need to follow, if you just follow all these procedures without seeing real value from all of them.
Yeah, but you still faced all this complexity and all those challenges. You mentioned also architect roles and managers that were influencing the process itself. I'm wondering how exactly all this complexity was influencing your thinking and how it was shaping you as an architect, because currently you work in architecture role. At that time you still worked as an engineer, working more with the technology. But I mean, you mentioned KLM and described the processes at KLM, and you faced different environments than your previous experience. I'm wondering how exactly it shaped you and how it gave you insight for the potential architect role you are currently in.
Yeah, I think it gave me insight that it's really important to see the big picture, because when you work as an engineer, you really focus on the small part of the whole flow. But then if you start to work in the big company, then it really helps to start to understand how it all will work together. And then I started to see the whole value of architects, and then it became for me interesting really not only to focus on details, but really to focus also on actually understanding the business part of that. And yeah, I think that was how I started to think also that I would like to move on with the architect role at some point.
Yeah, but it's interesting to understand also how the other people in other domains, not only in the technology one, in other roles like managers or analysts, maybe the testers, and people in those roles think, because they always think a little bit differently. So the picture you see, they see it from a different perspective. So this is also a valuable lesson actually as an architect, and this is a thing we need to understand, because this is something I talk in my other videos, that one of the roles or responsibilities of an architect is to translate the system design or the architecture to different audiences, to your stakeholder group. So what was your experience, not only in KLM, but when you developed as an architect over the time?
Yeah, I think maybe then we can move to my next project, and because my next project was at eBay, and actually I think that was a really changing point in my career, because it was also the longest time that I stayed in the company. So after KLM, I got interested into Scala programming. It was like Scala functional programming became really popular at that time. So like you remember, we were really going crazy into learning all this functional programming. Yeah, we felt like we're going back to the university, and so indeed, and I really wanted to find some project, some company that uses Scala. So that's why I moved to eBay, and actually it's not, it was like eBay classifieds. eBay owned certain e-commerce companies like Marktplaats here in the Netherlands. So that's why I was working not really for the main eBay product, but for Marktplaats. And there it was really interesting, because it was also beginning of this new way of development. Like we had journey teams, and then as an engineer, you start to work also with talking to your users, doing user testing. So then I could experience as engineer different type of work, let's say. So idea was that in our journey team we could do everything from beginning of designing the functionality that we want to develop, and then development, doing user research, and so the whole cycle. Yeah.
But it probably was quite a unique experience, I would say, especially for engineer, and especially if you compare it with your experience at other companies, because now you did not face maybe your product owner or business analyst who delivered you some requirements. Now you faced the end user itself. Yeah. So you did not, you had to challenge your thinking probably as well, because as an engineer or a technology architect, you think more in a design patterns, in the integration and in system interoperability. You maybe think about some policies and constraints that apply to the system, but you do not always see the bigger picture, and you do not always see the end value that is delivered to the end user. And also you do not see what actually the user is interested in and what problems they are facing. So it was probably a different experience from your previous projects.
Yeah, I think it was really quite unique at that time, and probably it all came from eBay and from these kind of companies that were developing all these new ways when engineers, they extend their value because they know the product, and they also get interested when they start to know the end user. You become really excited to deliver a functionality that will be used. So so it was really in your team, you just you work together. You work engineers, product managers. You test your product also by yourself. That was I think besides learning Scala, it was a very unique and interesting experience. But then also. At eBay, it was actually growing. The company was growing, and then I could also see, because initially we didn't have architect roles, but then the product was becoming more and more complex, and at certain moments also the company was acquired by Adevinta, that also owned some other e-commerce companies. And at a certain moment, I was also like changing my roles from engineer to tech lead. And at a certain moment, we saw the necessity of creating architecture department, because we really saw that we need to have a more structure in our software. As you know, like in the beginning, for example, with startups, it starts to grow really fast, and then at a certain moment you need to bring structure to your engineering and.
So was it actually the reason to introduce an architect role in your example? The fact that the company was growing and the complexity was growing and expanding, and was it the reason to introduce the architect role in this case in eBay, already acquired by Adevinta?
Actually, I think it was even introduced before it was acquired. Now, if I remember. But I think it was just really that we had to align more on the development of different parts of the system, because we had already many teams, and they were developing it without much alignment, and that's why it also went into different directions. So we saw that we really need to have certain people aligning on and guiding the teams, so coming up with certain guidelines that could help the teams, and that's why the actual architect role was introduced.
So basically, this part, the alignment with other teams, probably different departments, this is also where the complexity grew, because when you come with a solution, in your team you develop a system that may consist of multiple applications, but you own your domain, right? But still you depend on other domains, and you need to care about the interoperability with other teams. And every time you deliver a functionality, it probably does not only it's not contained in your domain only, but spans multiple domains, which requires coordination with other teams in order to deliver this end value to the end user that you mentioned in the very beginning.
Yeah.
So did it change the way you approached to your work? Did it change your thinking? Did it actually help you to evolve more into architect role because of the growing complexity?
There you start, at certain moment you start to see the value that it makes sense to align on certain principles. For example, like, when do we use event-driven event-driven principles? How do we design APIs? Because otherwise, in every domain you do it in a different way, and then it becomes inefficient from technological point of view, but also from personal point of view. If engineer wants to change the projects, he comes to another domain, and then everything is different there. So it's also learning curve is quite different. And also, like in the beginning, of course, you don't document much because then just source code is your code, but
documentation is overhead. Probably.
It's overhead in the beginning, but then at certain moment you realize that when your teams are growing, complexity is growing, then it's also important to find the way how to document important decisions in the consistent way. So that's why basically also I think also in the company to create these architecture roles, structure was changed a bit. So we really introduced the domains, and in these domains we introduced the domain architect roles, who would align with each other on these best practices of the development.
And this is how you gained your architect first, probably architect role, as a domain architect at
eBay. Yeah, indeed. Like it was a very smooth transition. So in that sense, it was not challenging for me because I was in the company for a while. So I knew the business, I knew the technology, and the domain. So people were already coming to me when they needed to clarify certain things. So in that sense, it was really not challenging. It was just growing path. I think it's kind of classical way how people often grow from engineering to architect.
But
roles.
You can, because you described your role where people were coming to you and you were already an expert in the given domain. So this very much reminds me of the glue person concept, where there is a person in a company that is aligning the solutions across multiple domains with multiple teams. So if I'm listening to you, then in this example, you were actually this glue person that guides, links, uncovers, and engages with the other stakeholders and other teams, probably, to come up or to help deliver the value to a company at the end.
Yeah, true. I think indeed I was this kind of glue person, and I think what was the main only challenge for me there was actually to see how to approach problems differently. Because I was really in this context for a while. I was focusing on the way how we solve it in this company. I knew everything in details, and I think the most challenging part for me was to understand how to look at the problem in a different way. So also it was difficult to understand challenges of new people coming. For example, there are proposals that were really different from the way how we were used to work. So here I was really expert in this area, in this domain. And I think the main challenge was how to not get stuck in that, and how to look at the problems from different angle.
So it's interesting that you are saying it. It basically implies that the fact that you had more thorough and deep knowledge of your domain was kind of a barrier or challenge for you to look at new solutions and opinions of maybe people from other domains. And instead of helping, it actually was a barrier that was challenging you in its own.
Yeah. I think at certain moment I really wanted. So that's why I wanted to search to do something else, or like to learn some other domains, because I really wanted to extend my way of thinking, and I wanted to really see other solutions of the same problems, and maybe also to go out of my comfort zone, because like at certain moment, if you are sort of expert in your work, then I think you are like really too comfortable, and then I think it helps you to go to change it and to try something else.
Was it because you got bored, or was it because you wanted to challenge yourself and to expand?
Yeah, I think it was more not really bored, but about challenging myself. And then I think it was good moment that the company, like when it was acquired by Adevinta, then I got a new possibility to go into the global architecture team that was formed because Adevinta owned also other e-commerce companies like in France, in Spain, in Germany. And this global architecture team was focusing on the actually global product of Adevinta. And then I think it was really interesting because there I would work with really teams from other countries. So it was kind of mostly remote work, but also with traveling to Paris or Barcelona, for example, and really working with teams in Spain or in Germany or in France. So
but it was probably completely different scale, right? Because initially you worked in as you mentioned, in a data payments in a 1-2 teams, right? Then you went to KLM, which was already a big company in itself, consisting of multiple departments. Then you go to eBay and work in a specific domain, expand to multiple domains, and then you go globally to different countries. So it basically expands geographically.
Yeah, true. That was indeed, like, scale was huge because then I worked with hundreds of people, because I worked with 2 domains. With one domain was also with leads from Spain, another domain was leads like from Germany, I think Italy. It was a really very different experience.
But also challenges were different, right? So it was not anymore about the API design, right, or scalability of your system, because you do face not only even different business domains, you even face different cultures and different time zones. And this does actually shape the way you think and approach to your work. What were the challenges there for you, and how did you resolve them?
Yeah, I think the main challenge was that then I didn't know the product itself, because I was not expert at all. Then I didn't know people, and I couldn't approach them easily, because they were not like in the same country. So like really to meet with them, I had to travel. And also in all these teams, like ways of working, they were different. I think at that moment I started really to develop some system how to approach actually these projects when you start as an architect in the new company, because there people were not coming to me.
And it was different comparing with your eBay experience, where you were the main expert, right?
Yeah, indeed. Like, but in this new environment, I was not interesting to anyone because, I didn't have, I was not expert in the product. I just started, so I had to be really proactive to approach people. So I think one important, let's say, characteristic of architect is really to be proactive. And when you start in the new company, you need to find whom to approach, like, who are your stakeholders, who is responsible for what. So I think in the beginning it's really important to find also these glue people, like you explain, because then they can explain you on the high level what they're working on.
So basically when you start a new project, you had to learn many new things, like people, systems, right? And one of the things you wanted to deliver is to prove your value, right? Because if we compare it with your experience in eBay, where you were expert and people were coming to you, you knew the system, you was a glue person, it was quite easy for you. So now in this new environment, it became completely opposite, right?
Yeah.
You are new, you don't know anyone, and you need to prove that you have a value, and you need to find a way to deliver value. And especially when it comes not only to the culture or environment you got used to work in, but also to a completely different cultures with different time zones, with probably some language barriers, this challenge becomes completely different and much bigger than simply your environment where you got used to work.
Yeah, true. So I think at that moment, then I developed some kind of practice of interviews. I don't know, I call it doing interviews of the teams. So you need to find people, important people in these teams. Like it can be engineering managers, can be product managers.
So people who make some decisions, right?
Make decisions, but also understand functionality or understand the system. So it can be, depending on the company, can be business analysts, can be some senior or staff engineers, engineering managers. So I think complexity is that all these roles, they have different responsibilities in different companies. So but then in the beginning I was doing this kind of stakeholder map, so understanding, for which teams, who is responsible for what, and then meeting with this team, doing sort of interview to understand what they are working on, how functionality works, and to see if I can find a way I can help, because then if you find at least one of the teams where you can contribute and you can, let's say, prove this value, then from that you can grow further, because you need to start with something.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned a stakeholder map, because in one of the videos I'm talking about the difference between the organization map, the official roles and responsibilities that documented probably somewhere, and the unofficial one, the power map, I call it. And there is always this alignment between the two, because the power map actually displays the actual state of things. The people who make the decision, the people who influence the decision. You mentioned that those could be completely different roles, not not necessarily some CIO or manager, but those could be simply engineers who work the same way as you did in eBay as a glue person, and who influences the process itself. So one of your challenges, as I understood in the beginning, and you mentioned that you developed kind of a system where you interview teams, is to find those glue people, or those people who from the power map who make things change or able to change.
Yeah, indeed. It's so it takes some time, but most important part is indeed to find these people. Like you get to know someone, then you get to know more, and then you
expand. But what is your strategy actually?
My strategy is actually this interviewing teams. So when you get to know someone, then and from these interviews, I could find the way how I could help. For example, in one discussion with a staff engineer in one of the teams, I heard that they want to start with event storming. And then, I had some experience, so I proposed that I could help them to organize this event storming workshops. And in these workshops, I could actually meet more people from the team, and then I could show myself, I could help them a bit, and then you start to get to know more people. So I think it's good to find this linking point to the team, how, and so I think it's a lot of improvisation. So I think important part is really to start, but then improvise and see what works for one situation, and try it in another situation, but
it probably will be different because of the different people and environment. But still, I mean, talking about your experience, you are saying there is a lot of improvisation, but we can already structure the approach. We can already, you use the word system, we can already categorize it probably and define it, because you said the first thing we do, you establish the contact, and then you see how the situation develops. You try to identify the people who actually have the influence. And then another thing I noticed is that you said, I try to deliver a value, because this creates the integration and it shows the team that you have a value and something valuable that is useful to them. So there are already some strategical steps that we can define from your experience, at least. Did you apply the system to other teams and scenarios?
Yeah, I think it's also important to understand how work in these domains or teams is organized, because it's really important how this domain or tribe leads, how they approach team setup. For me, it was completely different for two tribes. In one tribe, the tribe leads, they were really involved, and they tried to set up the same practices, the same rituals with all the teams, and it helped me because I got actually connected to them, and then through them I could get to know leads of other teams. So there I could create my this stakeholder map, and I could interact with them. In another domain, it was really different because tribe leads were not really involved into all this coordination and collaboration, and there I had to find a different approach, and there my approach was really directly to connect to each team and to find with which team it will work. So I could find connection with one of the teams, and I thought, okay, I will focus on this team, I see where I can help them, and after that I will see how I can actually extend this knowledge on another teams, because then, for example, we saw that actually we can help with teams how to organize their process around architecture decisions, around how to agree on the design decisions. So for me, together with other architects, because we were several architects in our architecture team, we could see that, okay, in that way we can contribute to these teams. So I think it's really depending on the situation. there are different ways how to find out.
Yeah, but I mean, if we generalize, you speak about establishing the link between the teams, and most probably it's not only about a team, because team is like a group of people. So it's probably you establish a link with certain people in a team who has a specific influence on the whole group itself. But I also assume that establishing a link with your colleagues in France and establishing a link with your colleagues in Germany is also a different experience.
Yeah, it's really interesting to understand this cultural, let's say, differences. So also to see how people work, how they make decision. Like indeed, it's quite different, for example, in France than in Germany or in Spain. So at that moment, I also read this book, Culture Map, which was very helpful to actually understand it already, to be prepared. But then, so for example, in France, it's like for me, I'm used to working in the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands, it's like
consensus-based culture.
Based, yeah, this polder model. You also mentioned in one of your videos.
True.
In
Germany and France is probably more a command-based structure, organization.
Yeah, I think in France, it's actually people, they really give their opinion, and then they also have lots of discussions, but in the end, they still, a lot of ideas come from top down, let's say. And even when people will not agree with that, they still will do their best actually to contribute to it or to take it into account. So I think still some hierarchical differences are there. Yeah.
Did it influence how decisions were made because of those organizational differences? Were they made faster? Did it take longer to discuss? Did you notice anything when you were interacting with different teams in different countries?
Yeah, like for us, even we worked in the same time zone, but still it was difficult to find time to meet with people because, for example, like Dutch or German, they have lunch like from 12 to 1, in France from 1 to 3, or like I mean, this number of hours when we could meet with each other, it was really limited. So even this kind of simple things made it quite challenging to work, yeah, like when you work with people from really different countries. And I think it's also different, for example, in the Netherlands, often, yeah, when we work in the companies, it's multicultural environment, but then everyone still works in the similar way, because here we're used to this local ways of working, and we already get used to this culture, and everyone so even everyone is from different countries, but still they work together in a similar way. But when you need to work with teams which are located really in other countries, and then you already can see that they approach solving problems or working in the way how they are used to. And yeah, for France, for example, also like language, of course, in France, yeah, you know that like speaking in English, it requires quite some efforts, and then not for every team it was easy, let's say. So yeah, so I think it's quite challenging, and it requires time. It also requires time to gain the trust between teams, yeah, because it's not like it happens after a few months, and to work efficiently together, you really need to have trust with each other. And also, like for architects, for us to start working in the new company, it takes some time to gain trust in you.
So it's not only about the technology, it's not only about the framework and architecture in itself, it's about the human side of the architecture, it's about the interaction of the people, it's about taking into account differences, time zone differences, cultural differences, the work differences differences. So it's not only about different technology stack that French or German or Dutch teams are using. It's not only about the different interoperability interfaces, not REST or SOAP APIs. It's actually much broader than technology itself and the even framework itself. And in order to deliver a value, those are the things you need to take into account, and actually they are one of the most important ones. If you want to be able to deliver the value, those links that you make with the teams and the people, the value delivery when you start a new project and start interacting with the new teams, and the mapping of the stakeholder map, knowing who are the people who make the decision, all those factors actually influence your work and influence how you as an architect can produce not only some artifacts that are being consumed by other teams in the form of a document, for example, of a diagram, but also selling this solution, translating your work to different stakeholder groups is part of your work as an architect. And the bigger it becomes, the more important it becomes and more challenging in itself.
Yeah, that's why I think, for me, one lesson that I learned is really not to jump to conclusions really fast when you start in the new company, because it's all. So I think for myself, I did some mistakes by I wanted to help people because I saw that some improvement is needed in collaboration between certain teams, but I didn't understand all complexity of interaction, all dynamics. And also I didn't know like personally people, so sometimes it's possible to jump into conclusions too fast. That's why I think it's really important to take time to understand the deeply, for example, what's going on, who is responsible for what, different opinions or some historical maybe differences in the opinions in these teams before trying to, let's say, help or trying to resolve certain situations. So
or sell your solutions.
Or sell the solutions, indeed. So I think what I learned is really that sometimes it's better to spend more time on
establishing
a relationship, on understanding better the context before jumping into the conclusions or trying to help with something or to resolve certain situation, because it could happen that you don't understand all details of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So we talked a lot about the human part of the architecture work, interaction with the people, finding the glue people, understanding the power map and so on. But I mean, this is not the only part of your architecture work. It's more, right? It's technology, it's technical discussions, it's architectural decisions, it's even documentation and the frameworks and some methodologies. So what is your experience in that regard? How did it help you? How did it facilitate you in delivering the value or selling your solution to different stakeholder groups?
Mm-hmm. I think in this situation, at certain moment, we started to document the whole application landscape and collaboration between applications for. So we were doing it with other architects for the whole system, and it helped me not only to understand better technical points like how applications are implemented and connected, but it also gave me possibilities to meet with the teams to talk about it. So it was like some concrete subject that helped me to establish connection with team members, because sometimes if you just meet and if you can do interviewing, you can discuss certain topics, but it always helps to have some hands-on topic to actually go into the depth of what they're working on, or to understand their landscape better. So yeah, so I think in that sense, documentation, like, okay, we decided to use C4 diagrams. It was quite a simple way to document the landscape. So it helped me really from both way, from technical side and also personal side to improve communication between teams.
So basically, in your experience, documentation and describing cozy architecture using diagrams, as in your case, help you to facilitate the solution and interaction with the other teams.
Yeah, and it's now I see it also at ING. Like actually now I also use documentation a lot to facilitate collaboration with teams, and yeah, so it's not only, it's of course useful for the future, like if someone wants to understand how certain systems work, but it also helps to facilitate communication. And
but I understand that in your case you use documentation as a way of communication, as a mean to communicate and interact with other teams with the same goal of delivering the value. So it is not a documentation for the sake of a documentation. It's not just producing documents and saying this is where my work as an architect ends, but it's opposite. It's just a beginning of starting the communication with other people, and maybe it's a more abstract way of representing the problem or the solution, and the way for interaction with different stakeholder groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's what I use at ING a lot, because and here since I learned Archimate, and I know that. Many architects they think, okay, TOGAF Archimate, it's too much overhead. It's like it's very complex. It requires lots of efforts, and not everyone understands it. But I think it's always compromised. Like with Archimate, for example, I can describe really a business flow and application flow in a way that I don't know, I cannot do it with any other design language. So that's why I think for me, really, in the last year since I started at ING, it really helped me to understand more detailed way of how to document my designs, and it helps me in collaboration with the teams, because it seems complex, but actually, yeah, maybe I even don't follow all strict rules of how you need to describe your diagrams, but it's good enough for my use cases. So if I need to discuss certain solutions, it really helps. I was getting feedback from people, they already start asking, oh, where is your blue-yellow diagram? Because I mostly use business and application layers of Archimate. So I think it's exaggerated that, for example, complexity of Archimate is so complex that only architects can understand it. I use it actually mostly in discussions, not with also with architects, but also with other people in the teams. And I think people get also after seeing a few times this kind of diagrams. They start to get used.
So you may say that representation of your solution in such a way using Archimate diagrams helps you to discuss and align on a solution with different stakeholders and teams. Yeah. But I mean, if I listen to you, you are saying that you use it as a tool that helps you to deliver a value, right? So you are not using it for the sake of you are not using Archimate for the sake of Archimate. So it's like you don't use it just to produce a diagram. You use it to help you in communication with other people and teams.
Yeah, it's like as a tool. It's indeed. It's like you mentioned in your talks about TOGAF.
Yeah, Goldhart's law. When the measure becomes a goal, it stops to be a measure.
Yeah, true. I think it becomes annoying when TOGAF or Archimate becomes just some bureaucratical procedures in the architecture teams. I think it should really be used where it's needed. So not really to produce certain set of documents which will be put to the repository, but then no one cares or no one looks into it. So that's why I think it's what I like at ING, that here, we actually approach learning Archimate or looking into how we can use it to improve our our architecture documentation, also that can help us with explaining it to our stakeholders. So I think in that sense, it's always should be kind of a discussion, not like, okay, to use TOGAF or not to use TOGAF, to use Archimate or not to use Archimate, but more what do we want to achieve and what is the best tool for that, and use only these parts of the tool which can help you, and not to make it as bureaucratic overhead.
Yeah, I can imagine that using Archimate and maybe some TOGAF practices help you to interact on a higher level with a broader range of stakeholders from different groups like management, analytics, test, compliance, security, and engineering itself. And this is more of a abstract way of representing the problem itself. But if you would have to discuss things with the more engineering team, you probably would use a different tool, which maybe is a UML or just a C4 diagram.
Yeah, I think it's actually how we work. We start with more high-level discussions and the business application. So you start with the business flow, discussing what do we want to develop, what do we want to achieve. Then from there you go to application flow, and from there already with engineers and the business analysts, you can go into the more detailing of to use UML diagrams or something else. What they're used to go into the details of what will be developed in the teams.
So listening to you, I hear that there is a lot of improvisation in your work, and also adaptation, especially when it comes to maybe different cultures, different stakeholder groups and different mindsets. So this work as an architect in itself challenging because of those factors, because there is not only the technological part, there are not only the Archimate or some methodologies that are being applied, but there is also this human part of the work that requires you interaction and alignment with different people.
Yeah, I think it's indeed, it's from one side, it's positive side of architecture work, that it's not like boring or it's unpredictable, it's not described well, so in every company it's different. So it's exciting and it's interesting, but then also it means that you always need to go out of your comfort zone. You need to always to adapt to the new situation, to improvise, to see what will work in this company, or in another company maybe it will not work.
So very often you need to change your strategy.
Yeah.
Things that worked in your previous experience may not work with new teams or new environment.
Yeah, and it can of course happen that you just find out that, okay, this company is not for you, or like this ways of working don't fit into what you like. But yeah, it's so for me, all these last years of first going into this global architect role, then going to ING, which is also a huge company with a very mature architecture team, and but scope is huge there, and it's all very regulated. So yeah, I think it was very interesting, but also quite challenging from
It's probably for yourself, it's important to understand where your limits are, where your borders are. And as you mentioned, in this work, you need to adapt a lot and improvise a lot, get out of your comfort zone, but you also need to keep your own balance, right? So that the external factors do not influence completely your own internal world, so to say. And this is also important to balance and to know first yourself, and second, let others know that things may not be acceptable for you.
Yeah. I think what really helps is really to stay honest and for others to gain trust in working with you. It can be sometimes awkward. It can be going out of the comfort zone. And it can happen that with certain teams or certain people, it will be easier to establish connection and easier to work. But that, I think that's really part of architecture work, and often it's just like to be easy on yourself and not try to resolve all problems immediately. So sometimes it's also in the architecture work we don't see results very fast immediately. Yeah, so also it's good to just to accept that it will take time, and just find what you enjoy in the current situation, in the current project, to focus on that, and then to see gradually how it evolves. So I think it's what I'm also trying now.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you. It was quite exciting and interesting experience, because you grew from gaining educational knowledge at Eindhoven University about the architecture, and then going through DOCdata payments, where you worked in a smaller teams, and growing to multi-domain projects at eBay, where you worked as an architect and already started your career as an architect, and actually growing to a multinational, multi-geographical architect role, where you need to deal not only with the technological challenges, but also with geographical differences, cultural differences. We speak about the different work cultures, like consensus-based or company-based. I mean, all this brings many challenges in itself. And the way you approach the problem is different from one company to another company. And this is a big challenge, but at least I hope that it gave some impression to the people who are watching this about how the daily work of an architect look like.
Yeah, thanks.
So thank you for coming and sharing your experience.
Yeah, it was nice to discuss it. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.